Here is the reality, folks.
Attacks abroad. Attack in San Bernardino.
Attacks.
Attack. Attacks. Attacks.
Attacks. Attack.
Attacks.
Attack. Attack. Attacks.
Attack. 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 Attacking.
1,100 air attacks a day.
Under tremendous attack.
An attack on our country.
Attack the oil. Attack the oil.
September 11th.
September 11th. The war on terrorism after September 11th.
9/11.
Since 9/11. After 9/11.
Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. After 9/11.
9/11. The World Trade Center. The World Trade Center came down.
The World Trade Center came down because Bill Clinton didn't kill Osama bin Laden when he had the chance to kill him.
The World Trade Center came down.
Bin Laden. Bin Laden. Bin Laden.
Bomb, 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 bomb it.
Bomb.
Bomb, bomb,
Bomb.
bomb, bomb.
Bomb. Bomb ISIS.
Bomb that country.
Collateral damage.
Boots on the ground. Boots on the ground.
Boston Marathon bombing. Butchers.
Saturation. Carpet bombing.
Saturation bombing. Carpet bombing. Combat.
Combat.
People died. Deadly force.
Death. 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 Death.
Death.
Death.
Dying. Deadly.
Die dead.
Death.
Death.
Death. Dying. Deaths. Deaths.
Death.
Death. Dying. Dying. Dying.
Death.
Executed.
Dad or mom going home in a box. He died.
Killing.
The killing.
Decimate.
Horrific.
Horrifying.
Horror.
Horror.
Hostages.
Hostage.
Hostages.
Hostage. 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 Hostages held hostage in Iran. Hostage.
Hostages being held in Iran.
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 Iran. Iran. Iran. Iran. Iran.
Iran. Tehran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran. Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran.
Iran captures our sailors and parades them before the world on video.
Iran is sponsoring terrorism.
Consequences for Iran.
I'll bet you dollars to donuts.
Iranian nuclear program.
Nuclear.
Nuclear.
Nukes. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons. A nuclear weapon.
Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons.
Iranian. Iranians.
Iranian
aggression.
ransom.
Change Iranian behavior.
Iranian nuclear deal.
Iranian nuclear weapons program. Iraq.
Attack Iraq.
Iraqi.
Islamic jihadists.
Islam.
Jihadist University.
And we are going to be loyal to our allies like Israel, not enemies like Iran.
Muslim.
Murder of
National security threat.
Nasty.
Nazi.
Please go to my website, bencarson.com, and read my immigration policy.
Overwhelming air power.
Overwhelming force.
Use overwhelming force.
Overwhelming U.S. force to defeat them.
People aren't dumb.
Quit trying to ship rockets into Gaza that can be used against Israel.
what the Lord wants.
We've got to get rid of ISIS quickly.
We're going to have to strike them, not just in Iraq and in Syria, but in every other part of the world where they've now created hubs of operation.
We need to destroy ISIS.
We are going to have to hit very, very hard to knock out ISIS.
Destroy ISIS.
Destroy ISIS. Destroying ISIS.
Destroy ISIS.
Destroy.
Defeating ISIS. Defeat these terrorist networks.
Defeat ISIS.
Defeat ISIS.
When it comes to defeating ISIS,
Defeat ISIS.
The caliphate. The caliphate.
Chopping off heads. Fight ISIS.
Fight against ISIS. Fighting ISIS.
The fight against ISIS.
And fight.
Fighting. Fighters. Fighting. Fighters. Fighting. Fighters.
Fighting.
Fighters. Fight.
Fighters.
Fighters.
Fighting.
Fighters.
fighting ISIS.
Fight ISIS.
Focused on defeating the enemy.
Go after ISIS.
Go after our enemies.
God bless you.
Fossil fuel. Government is the enemy. We hate
speech. Hater.
Obamacare. Honest to goodness. Honestly.
Jihadist group.
James Foley was killed.
I will build a wall.
Kidnapped.
kill 168 people in Oklahoma City.
Kill the enemy. Killers. Killing millions.
Killing people.
Knock out ISIS.
Let's not insult the intelligence of the American people.
Living in fear.
Listen.
Look.
Listen.
Profanity.
Profanity's profanity.
Shameful.
Shame.
He had $100 in his underwear.
Saddam Hussein.
Saliva and urine.
Terrorism.
The terrorist.
Terrorism.
Terrorist attack.
Terrorist groups.
Terrorist nations.
Go after terrorist networks.
There is just too much unpredictable threat and danger in the world today.
Torture, 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 torture,
Torture, torture, torture, torture.
torture.
Timothy McVeigh blowing up the federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children in a daycare center.
Waterboarding, waterboarding, waterboarding,
Waterboarding, waterboarding.
waterboarding, waterboarding.
Violence,
Violence.
Violence.
violence,
Violence. Violence.
Violence and killing. Violate Americans.
Violent extremists.
War. War.
War. War. War. War. War. War.
War.
world war,
War.
war,
War.
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 War. War. War.
War.
War.
Wars. Wars. War.
Wars.
War against ISIS.
War in Iraq. War in Iraq.
The war on terror.
Wartime.
War with the Arabs.
Warfare. 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 Warfare.
2 wars.
Who do you know will stand up to our enemies? Air attacks.
Air attacks.
Air campaign. Air campaign.
air power,
Use that air power. Overwhelming air power.
Airstrikes.
airstrikes, airstrikes, airstrikes,
Airstrikes. 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 Airstrikes.
Airstrikes.
Preemptively strike. Preemptive strike.
preemptive strike,
If a preemptive strike is necessary to keep us safe, then we should do it.
Overwhelming air power. Overwhelming air power.
Alienate Americans. Americans are angry. Angry. Arab.
betrayed Israel.
Progress. 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 Progress.
Progress.
Progress,
Progress.
Progress.
Progressive. 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 Progressive.
Progressive. Progressive. Progressive. Progressive.
Progressive. Progressive.
Progressive.
Progressive. Progressive. Progressive.
Progressive.
Progressivism. Progressive. Progressive.
Israel,
Racism.
Punch him in the nose.
Race.
Racism. Racism. Racism.
Institutional racism.
Racially polarized. Racial justice.
A racial issue.
Racial races. Systemic racism.
Race relations.
Race. Systemic racism.
Police.
The police. The police. The police. 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 The police. Police.
Police. Police. Police.
Policing. Police.
Pose a real danger to our nation.
Policing.
Police.
African Americans.
African American. African Americans.
African American.
African American. African American. African American. African Americans.
African Americans.
African American.
African American. African Americans. African American.
African American. African American. African American. African American. African American.
African Americans.
African Americans.
African Americans.
Black men.
Blacks.
Black woman.
College.
Colleges. Colleges.
College education.
College.
College.
Colleges.
College education.
Invest in education. Public education.
Well educated.
Education.
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 Black.
Education.
Education. Universities.
Schools.
Paid his way through school.
Tuition.
Student.
Great school.
Stay in school, a college education, college degree, educational opportunities, high school graduates, public education,
Public schools.
colleges and universities.
Drug addicted. Drug and alcohol addiction.
Pharmaceutical drugs.
Drugs. Pills.
Drugs.
Prescription drugs.
Prescription drugs.
Addiction.
Prescription drugs.
Medicine.
Marijuana. Do marijuana.
The tremendous problem we have with heroin.
Heroin overdose. Heroin.
Oxycontin.
She ended up spending some time in a crack house. I still remember my father and me driving up to get Miriam out of that crack house.
Open a beer and watch the Mets.
Addiction. Alcoholism.
Drug girl.
Drug companies.
The drug companies.
I have an agenda.
It's like going to the moon. It ain't gonna happen.
Minorities.
Minority.
More jails.
2 days ago, he said he would take his pants off and moon everybody.
You lock them up and you toss away the key. They're never going to get out.
Jackboots.
With the help of God.
we should be putting people into Guantanamo. We needed to seek retribution.
ISIS.
ISIS.
ISIS is the most dangerous jihadist group in the history of mankind.
ISIS.
Fighters.
ISIS is not just a jihad. jihadist group. They're an apocalyptic group.
Mass destruction.
Magic pixie dust.
McDonald's.
Middle class.
Middle class. Middle class. Middle class.
Middle class.
Middle class. The middle class. Middle class. Middle class. Middle class.
Middle class.
The middle class.
Middle class. The middle class. The middle class. The middle class.
The middle class.
The middle class.
Ordinary Americans, working class kids.
Working class Americans.
You could make a middle class wage. Working class people. Middle East.
Middle East.
The Middle East.
The Mideast. The Mideast.
Mideast.
The Middle East.
The Middle East.
The Middle East.
The Middle East. The Middle East.
The Middle East. The Middle East.
I've studied, the Middle East.
In the Middle East, we have people chopping the heads off Christians.
Radicals.
Radical.
Radical.
Radical. Radical. Radical.
Radical Islamic jihadists.
Radical Islamic terrorism.
Radicalizing people.
There are barbaric acts out there.
They've declared jihad on us.
They want to trigger a showdown in a city named Dabiq.
This just beggars the imagination.
Threat of homegrown violent extremism. Pose a threat. Pose a threat.
The threat that ISIS poses.
Threat to America's security.
Threats. Threat.
Threatened.
Threats.
Threats.
Threat.
The threat of a nuclear Iran.
Threatening.
Threats.
Threatened.
Threats.
Threats. Threatened. The growing threat of ISIS.
Everybody now is being threatened by radical Islam.
Threats facing this country.
Major threats.
Threats of terror.
Threats to the United States.
Utterly and completely destroying ISIS. Utterly defeat them.
Take on ISIS. Take out ISIS.
Take out ISIS. Taking out ISIS.
Take the wealth away.
The Taliban.
The Taliban.
Taliban terrorists.
The Lord wants us to be connected.
The end of the world.
Tears rolling down their cheeks. Terrible Americans.
The Iraq War.
The next attack is just around the corner.
The single greatest nation in the history of all mankind.
Vetted. 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 Vetted.
Come together. Come together. Come together.
Canary in the coal mine.
Downward spiral.
The dark side.
A time for choosing.
Young Americans. People can have real differences in their lives that will make them better for now and into the future.
I will build a wall.
Crush ISIS.
Promise.
We're going to build a wall. The San Bernardino.
If I'm elected president, we will win and we will win and we will win. Thank you.